Welcome to the August meeting of the Williamson County chapter of the Native Plant Society of Texas. We're glad you're here online, and this beautiful picture was taken by Randy's husband, Philip. It's a bean. So, and if you see one of our plant sale signs and you see a monarch on it, it's him. It's that one. All right, let's go to the next slide then. All right, is anybody here? This is their first time here, first time to a NPSOP meeting. One. Okay. So glad you're here. Are you a member? Okay. If you ever decide to join and you indicate you'd like to affiliate with our chapter, we will purchase you a beautiful name tag, as you see a lot of our members wearing. Okay, well, you're gonna get a heavy dose of that tonight for sure. So this is where you can find us, where you can locate us, and somewhere in here I have another slide. Oh, first time attendee. Oh, and our social media person, Diana Wilson, has asked, how do you hear about us? How did you find the meeting? Some of you have got it ingrained into your DNA to show up here every second Thursday of the month, but not you. Any of you that are fairly recent, and any of you that are online, if you tell us in the chat where you hear about it, if you found us on Facebook or you're subscribed to our blog, and you can subscribe to our blog whether you remember or not. It's a good place to keep up with what's going on. So we'd like some feedback on that, so we know where we're pointing our marketing efforts. Okay, Google, the internet, that's where everything is. Okay. This is our field trip slide for this month. The Hidden Springs survey for August the 13th has been canceled because, as you can imagine, it would be like wandering through old McDonald's French fries looking for plants. In September, we have we've got something in the planning stages, but we can't let that cat out of the bag yet because we don't want to embarrass ourselves in case it doesn't happen. You know, don't want to look like we just fell off the turnip truck. And then in October, we were going to go to, we'd had a planned rescheduled tour to the Waco wetlands, but their wetlands are, guess what? Not wet. They also are as crispy as Hidden Springs. So we have Mark Stutzer, our incoming board member, and his focus is going to be on schools and working with schools and education, has 3 pollinator gardens, 3 different spots on campus that he's been watering faithfully with 5-gallon water buckets all summer long. I've seen him do it, and they're all easy to get to. You can pull up to them in the car. They're very accessible. And we're hoping, last year about this time, he has white mist flower on the front entrance to the school. He's got those 2 big front entrance beds, and they were covered with monarchs during migration. So might get lucky again. So, and that's part of it. Plus, we have an individual or 2 that's allowing us to come to their private yard. So that will be October 22nd, and details will appear on our blog, on our website. That's right. If it does not get cooler, it will be in the morning. That is. All right. Then in November, we're going to have a Black Friday opt-outside field trip. Some of you are probably aware that the opt-outside on Black Friday came from REI, the outdoor company. They close on Black Friday and encourage you to go outside and seek nature and not the mall. But we have a field trip planned for November 25th, and I don't remember if we have a location, do we? We had a location at Lake Creek. Oh, that's right, the Lake Creek, where we have Lake Creek Trail in Round Rock, Austin area, near the Lakeline Mall, where we have some signs. So. It's Palmer, Morris, Anderson Lane, up, yeah, that whole, yeah. Anyway, okay, and then we'll have now it'll be the 6th survey, and hopefully something will have rained on it, and we'll have something to see in December. So. Okay. Anyway, oops, that's a delete. So we didn't have anybody sign up for that. So free plants at the back of the room, or some very nice Lindheimer senna. And I have a the plant sale sign up there beside it so you can see it. And it's a good, nice drought hardy one. It's got that nice gray fuzz on the foliage. These are our upcoming speakers. You're probably going to fuss at me again, Erin, but I'm fixing to hide the floating controls again. Okay.
Okay.
Here are our upcoming speakers. Joe Marcus is our speaker next month. He has the, it heads up the Native Plants of North America project, which is the database on wildflower.org.
I need to just.
I have competition. But to give you kind of a notation, our sign, our plant sign that we have back there on Lindheimer Senna has got a QR code on it that takes you to the Lindheimer Senna page on that in the North America Plant Project. So he is in charge of that big plant list. If you do an internet search for plant, you put in a botanical name, somewhere in those first 5 hits, it's going to be, if it's native, there's going to be a wildflower.org site of that plant. And that's what that is. And he's in charge of it. So that should be very interesting. Firewise plants, we're all thinking about that, aren't we? And then our own Diana Wilson with her Fibonacci sequence and native plants. And then December 8th, we will be back here. We will be in the Round Rock Library in November, but we'll be back here for our annual holiday gathering and silent auction. And I think we have January's speaker lined up, but I can't remember who it is. Okay, this is the book we're giving away tonight, recommended by Ray, Monarchs in a Changing World. Those of you that are in the room, whose ever name we draw, there it is. And then someone online will get it. Door prize. Okay. We have the state symposium coming up in next month, in September 22nd and 24th in Alpine. We have a quilt that was created in 2020, and then that symposium did not end up being in person. It has one quilt square in it that is a 1930s map of Texas. And that's what that kind of inset feature is. And this picture is also back there. And so are the tickets and the prices, et cetera, et cetera. We have to sell you the tickets in person. So if you want interested in buying it, you got to do it tonight. And then the symposium, you can go online and register. I don't know if there's any good field trip places left. You can also go on the nipsot.org store. You can go to shop and then the store, and you can get swag. That's what is on the t-shirt and the water bottles and the tote bags, et cetera, et cetera. Nice Esperanza picture. Whether you go or not, it is a nice Texas wildflower t-shirt.
That's the West Texas.
Well, yes, it's. Well, it says Tacoma Stands on it, so, and this is a Michael Eason thing. So if you want to take him to the mat, we're all going to sell tickets, and I'm selling tickets and watching that argument. So, all right, chapter meetings, always take note of the location. You are being recorded. Those of you on Zoom. All right, and next will be our speaker. Really excited about him. Enjoyed talking to him in our pregame show here. This is who he is and what he does. One of our members heard about him speaking to a prairie group in North Texas, and that's how we found him. And he's coming to us from his home in Stillwater, Oklahoma. You still there, Ray?
Yes, I am.
Okay, let me exit my PowerPoint.
Here we go. Do you see prairie full of milkweeds?
We do. You're good.
Awesome. Here I go. Well, wish I was there to meet y'all, but I got to stay here in Oklahoma this week. My wife's out of town, and I got to hold down the fort and take care of the farm. I am a pollinator ecologist in Stillwater, Oklahoma, working for the Xerces Society, and I work on all kinds of pollinators, beetles, flies, moths, wasps, bees, but I work on monarchs and other butterflies more than anything else. I got my Ph.D. studying butterflies, got my master's studying butterflies, so I'm a bit of a butterfly guy, but I love bees too. What is the Xerces Society? We are a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to save the world by saving the invertebrates, all the little creatures that help run the world. The little butterfly you see on the left is the Xerces blue butterfly that used to live out in San Francisco Bay area. When San Francisco got built up, the habitat for this butterfly was destroyed and this butterfly went extinct. People who loved that butterfly and other butterflies got together and said, hey, we want to make sure this never happens again. And they formed the Xerces Society 51 years ago. We were going to have a really, really awesome in-person 50th anniversary celebration in Portland last year, but I think you can guess why we had to go online for that. It was still a nice affair, but yeah, last year was our 50th anniversary, and we're based in Portland, Oregon, but we've got offices scattered all over the country, and soon we'll have one in Canada, of all places. So we're excited about that. I also work for the NRCS, which is a unit of the US Department of Agriculture. They don't pay my salary. Xerces pays my salary, but they pay me to help the NRCS with their work. And what do? I mainly help farmers and ranchers preserve, protect pollinator habitat on their land in the central US from Texas to North Dakota. So I get spread around quite thin, but NRCS is an amazing governmental agency. They have over 9,000 employees, and they have quite simply lots and lots of money to provide farmers and ranchers to help farmers and ranchers conserve soil, air, water, animals, and plants on their land. Quick outline of the presentation. I'm going to give you a brief intro on monarch biology, sort of Monarchs 101, followed by more advanced treatment of some of the same topics, focusing on milkweeds, nectar plants, and monarch migration. Then I'll talk a little bit about managing habitat for monarchs. If you have acreage or know people who have acreage, give you some ideas of things you can do on that acreage to create and manage monarch habitat. I'll talk about additional resources, and then we'll have the question and answer session. I want to start off with the big picture, and the big picture is that invertebrates are in trouble. They're on the decline. So it's not just butterflies, it's bees, it's beetles, it's many, many of the little creatures that help run the world. And actually, some studies are showing massive decreases in insect biomass. Like in Germany, a 50-year study showed that the weight of all the insects combined in that region of Germany has decreased by 50%, which means, well, what does that mean? What are the implications for the things that eat those insects? What about the birds that eat insects? Or the mammals? What's going to happen to them when their food base has declined by 50%? It's a big deal, very big deal. Of course, this talk focuses on monarchs, and this graph is the key graph to show with regards to monarch populations, at least the population east of the Rocky Mountains. Monarchs are in decline east of the Rocky Mountains, and hopefully you can see my cursor. I bet you can. Notice that these bars represent the monarch population that spends the winter in Mexico. And the numbers you see here, like the 18.19, that's the number of hectares of forest that was covered with monarchs in the winter of 96, 97. That's about 50 acres. There were about 50 acres of monarchs, solid monarchs. They think that was about 1 billion butterflies, billion with a B. And the basic trend from the 1990s, excuse me, let me go back. I shouldn't have clicked. The basic trend from that period down to 2013 was way down. Now, since the horrible low point of 2013, 2014, we've gotten to a steady low. It goes up and down. It's always going to go up and down. But we'd rather be going up and down like it used to at high levels rather than up and down at these low levels. So monarchs are indeed in trouble east of the Rocky Mountains, and they're in trouble west of the Rocky Mountains too. I won't go into that. very basic, gotta cover it. Monarch life cycle, just like all other butterflies, they've got 4 stages: the egg, the larva or caterpillar, the pupa, also known as a chrysalis, and the adult stage. 4 stages. And this cycle can be very quick, especially in warm places like Texas. You can go, a female can lay an egg, and that egg can become a new egg-laying female about 28, 29, 30 days later. So during the warm season, you can have a very fast life cycle. As most of you know, I think monarch caterpillars are host plant specialists. They only feed on milkweeds, and that's a monarch caterpillar feeding on a milkweed on our farm here in Oklahoma. How did milkweeds get their name? Well, of course, it's the milky sap. I want to point out that milky sap is a chemical defense. I'm sorry, it's a physical defense. It's a physical defense. Milkweed plants also have chemical defenses that I'll talk about, but the sap itself, just because it's gooey and sticky, is a defense. It gums up the mouth parts of small insects, and it'll even kill some monarch caterpillars. Monarchs are not immune to that issue, but they do have steps to try to get around it. But yes, milkweeds are really known for their chemical defenses. And if you ever took organic chemistry way back in college, you might have learned about structural formulas of chemicals. And this is showing you the structural formula, the basic general structural formula of cardiac glycosides, also known as cardinalides. These are the main chemical defenses of milkweed plants. Well, let me go back to this. As monarchs eat milkweeds, they incorporate cardinalides from the milkweeds into their tissues as larvae, and they still have them when they metamorphose into pupae and into adults, so that if a blue jay or some other bird tries to eat a monarch that is full of cardinalides, the blue jay will often vomit, which is fortunate actually. The cardinalides are toxic to the blue jay, but it's fortunate that the cardinalides are emetic. They make the blue jay vomit. They would make us vomit too, from what I've been told, which again is fortunate because that helps protect these vertebrates. But the birds learn not to eat monarchs because of the toxins in them. And this was a photo taken by Professor Lincoln Brower, who was my professor at the University of Florida from 1991 to 1996. And he was a very amazing mentor. He passed away about 5 years ago. He was the world's greatest expert on monarchs for many, many years. Adult monarchs, of course, feed on nectar. No surprise there. Want to make sure everyone's clear that we like to look at there being 3 main monarch populations in the lower 48 states. The eastern population that I've already talked about, the population west of the Rockies, which spends the winter in California. Of course, that eastern population goes to Mexico. And then there is a population in South Florida, a non-migratory or predominantly non-migratory population. This one isn't very well understood, but basic idea of it is there's some tropical milkweed. There's plenty of tropical milkweed down there. And there are native milkweeds down there that are evergreen. And there are monarchs that are just breeding all year round. I think this bar is probably a little inaccurate. It should probably be further south. It should mainly be closer to Fort Lauderdale, Miami. Okay, the eastern population, the great majority of monarchs in North America go to Michoacan, Mexico. And this is a photo I took in Michoacan of the Oyamel fir forest at Sierra Chinqua, which is one of the best monarch overwintering sites in Mexico. I went there in March 2019, and I'm so glad I did. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And didn't have a great camera with me, but I saw tens of millions of monarch butterflies, particularly at El Rosario, which year after year is the single best site to go. If you've never been to these sites, I strongly recommend it. Even if there were no butterflies there, you would love this place due to the natural beauty of the landscape. We're talking about rugged mountains covered with fir trees And then down below are all kinds of fascinating shrubs and forbs, including lots of interesting Asteraceae. For instance, the genus Stevia, the genus that gives us the sugar substitute, and very interesting Senecio and Salvias. So you would love it just for that. But the monarchs, well, they take it over the top. Now I want to get into some of the stuff maybe people don't think about as often. So I would call this more advanced stuff, I guess. And my first point I want to make is that monarchs are habitat generalists, especially when compared to most other butterfly species. There are plenty of butterfly species that only live in prairie or that only live in forest. We are lucky, for those of us who love monarchs, we're lucky that monarchs will use a variety of habitats, or a variety of ecosystems. We see some tallgrass prairie in the upper left, next to some savanna, next to a cattle pasture in Arkansas, next to a cornfield, which if it has milkweeds, it's going to be monarch habitat, next to some longleaf pine forest in Florida, next to some swamp, next to some salt marsh, and then in the lower right, beach. Monarchs do use the beach from time to time. So it's good news for monarchs that they're habitat generalists. But of course, they are host plant specialists. And a little quiz for you. How many species of milkweeds are there in the US? Think about it for a moment. I'll give you another 5 seconds to think. Here's the answer. More than 100 species of milkweeds. So you will read documents or you will hear people talking about milkweeds this and milkweeds that, as if there is only one kind of milkweed, as if all milkweeds are alike. And milkweeds are an extremely diverse group. I personally have seen milkweeds that at maturity are 4 inches tall, and native milkweeds that at maturity are 7 feet tall. I've seen milkweeds flower in almost every color. They're really wonderful. And of course, Texas has more than anybody. What native plant genera do monarch larvae eat?
All of the above.
All of the above is correct. All of the above. Which of these genera are found in Texas?
I think so.
All of the above.
Where does Petalius occur?
No idea. I'm just guessing, man.
Wow, you are a good guesser. A very good guesser. I'll show a picture of Petalius. Petalius is a trick because it's a new genus name just assigned about 3 years ago, ironically by a professor who lives about 3 miles from me here in Stillwater. But yes, Texas is one of only 2 states that has all these genera. And a lot of people don't refer to these other genera as milkweeds, but I do. Because they mainly have milky sap and monarchs are using them. And systematists do put them in the same, gosh, they're clearly in the same family, but they're also not only in the same family, in the same subfamily, I think they're in the same, it's even a closer level of the taxonomy than that. And again, monarchs are sensing them as all being pretty similar. So yes, monarchs use all of these genera. And now let's take a look at some of these. Of course, the genus Asclepias, the most famous milkweeds. And down here, we've got my personal favorite, butterfly milkweed. It doesn't really grow that well in my county, but I've done a lot of research on it elsewhere, and it's very beautiful. The genus Synancum, these are vines. All the others are vines, actually. If they're not Asclepias, they're vines. So Synancum levi, I think that makes it in North Texas. Don't know if it makes it to you. Matelia or Matalea is a vine you have in Texas, a native with multiple species. I'm pretty sure you have Gonalobus suberosus, which used to be Matelia gonocarpa. That's a native milkweed vine, a photo I took in Florida decades ago. The photo here of Funastrum, I believe Funastrum sinancoides, I took in the lower Rio Grande Valley a few years ago. So I know this is in Texas. Beautiful plant. Monarchs use it as a host plant. And finally, Petalius. And I think So the specific epithet is either palustra or angustifolium. I can't remember. Does anybody recognize this plant?
Is it,
Sorry?
Twisted, oh gosh. It's a tie vine or something.
It's not
I think I heard somebody say it. This grows at the edge of salt marsh.
Oh,
So this is on the Gulf Coast.
You were
And
saying
monarch.
a tie vine, which tie vine is usually morning glory.
Got it.
It can have milky sap.
Yep. This one does have milky sap. It's a vine growing right at the edge of salt marsh on the Gulf Coast, all the way from Texas to Florida, and then up the Atlantic to North Carolina. Monarch coast plant. Okay, now let's talk about some of the really abundant milkweeds in Texas. The most abundant one, I think, in Texas as a whole is Asclepias viridis. There are places where this reaches population densities of 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 plants per acre. This plant gets really thick. Monarchs do great on it. And we've got a range map and just another photo on the left. Now, another one really abundant in Texas, especially the western half of Texas, from central Texas west, is Asclepias asperula, spider milkweed. Now, I understand you probably have different common names than me. Asclepias viridis, a lot of people call it green milkweed. Well, I am sticking to one system of nomenclature, and that is the USDA plants system. It makes it a lot easier for me if I choose one set of common names, because I work all over the eastern half of the country, and people in Florida and people in Iowa and Kansas and Texas all have different names for the same plant, different common names. So I like to use scientific names, of course, but I also like to use a uniform set of common names, and I go with USDA plants. So that's what we got. For these two, this one is spider milkweed, Asclepias asperula. These two look a lot alike. How do you tell them apart? Well, we've got viridis on the left. The leaves are wider. They're always wider than the leaves of Asperula. How else would you tell them apart? I think I have another photo of flowers, but I think the pods of Asperula are a little more ridged than those of viridis. But here we go. This is a better clue. In addition to the width of the leaves, look at I might get botanical terms wrong, but I think these are simply petals. Look at the light green petals of viridis and see that they are so long that they go well past the purple hoods. On Asperula, the petals are a good deal shorter so that they do not go past the hoods. And that, I think, is you could take to the bank. As long as they're blooming, you're not going to mistake, as long as you remember how to distinguish the two floral structures, you're not going to mistake viridis for Asperula. Another really important milkweed, and I've heard it's plenty of occurrences of it in your region, Zyzodes milkweed, Asclepias oenothera. This one I show, again, it's my personal favorite. It's been recorded in most counties in the eastern half of Texas. So it's quite widespread. It's actually been recorded in more counties in the US than any other milkweed in the US of any genus. But it prefers very, very well-drained soil, like sandy soils. So if you've got a heavy clay, this plant isn't going to be there. It's sort of picky. Okay, earlier I talked about milkweeds having cardinalides as their chemical defenses. Let's go into the weeds, the nitty-gritty of those chemical defenses. You need to know that milkweeds are very, very different in their chemical defenses. I know this list is hard to read, but the key is that on the left, we've got a listing of Asclepias species, starting with Asclepias masonii, which I've never seen, but to my memory lives out in the southwestern desert. And it has a mean cardinalide concentration of 7,910, which is astronomically high. Down not much further, at number 6 is Asclepias asperula, which has a mean cardenolide concentration of 886, also very, very high. What this means is this milkweed is so loaded with cardenolides that it is very toxic to cattle, which is a great blessing for monarchs because you all got a lot of cattle in Texas. Cattle don't eat this milkweed because it is so toxic and it tastes bad. And that's a huge boon for monarch butterflies. Further down the list, we see viridis. I don't think when this document was published, Enothyroides had been studied yet. But notice way down at the bottom is the most abundant milkweed in the northern states, Asclepias syriaca, a very, very low cardenolide concentration. So monarchs actually aren't getting that much chemical defenses from eating common milkweed up in Iowa and Wisconsin and New York. Another page, we see way down near the bottom, Asclepias tuberosa, almost no cardenolides whatsoever. Asclepias verticillata, same thing. Asclepias viridiflora, which I'm almost certain you have in Wilco, 0 cardenolides. So enormous variation in the cardenolide chemistry, which has major implications for whether or not these plants exist in rangeland and whether or not these plants will be toxic to your dogs if you're growing them. My wife's a veterinarian. She says, Ray, dogs just typically don't go out and eat toxic plants. And again, the cardenolides taste bad, even to mammals, to most mammals. So dogs rarely get poisoned. I won't say never, but it is helpful to know that some of these milkweeds have no toxin or next to no toxin. Monarchs use a variety of nectar plant species, but of course they show preferences. Of the thousands of species of flowering plants in Texas, there are only a few, maybe 100 or 200 or 75 that they visit often. And they tend to be in the families shown here. And we'll cover a few of the genera and a few species quickly. Liatris, of course. This is a northern Liatris. It might be in East Texas. Really beautiful. Monarchs love the heck out of it. Goldenrods, I know you've got many of those. In general, they're total winners for monarchs. Asters and genus Symphyotricum are terrific. I took a quick look at the range map and saw that this is either in Wilco or it's in surrounding counties. If you don't have this one, consider getting it. It's pretty darn drought tolerant. We've had a bad drought in Oklahoma this year. Mine are still hanging on. And they bloom very, very late. Here they bloom in mid-October. And so they're one of the last native plants that monarchs use before they head down to Texas. Thistles are terrific, including Texas thistle. And of course, if you want a native annual, one of my favorites is Cowpendaceae, well, golden crown beard according to USDA, Verbicina and Celioides. And I wish I was there to talk to people afterwards. This is my favorite native annual. I have thousands of these on our farm. I'll never be without this plant because it blooms from April to November, and I have pollinators on it every day of the year, every day of the growing season that it's not raining. So I'm guaranteed to be feeding pollinators if I have this plant. It's free, basically. Somebody gave me seeds and I've never, they've always just self-sown since then. They do need well-drained soil. Here are just some of the many pollinators that will use golden crown beard. Frostweed, same genus. This is, I've been told, the most important native perennial for monarchs flying through Texas in the fall. And I certainly have plenty of this on our farm, and I have read papers indicating that this is very, very important, particularly along the rivers of Texas. Frostweed, Verbicina virginica, terrific native perennial for monarchs. I am in charge of a database that the Xerces Society maintains. We collect data on nectar plants used by monarchs all over the US. We really care overwhelmingly about the native species. If you've seen monarchs nectaring on native plants, please email me. We don't have enough data yet, and I will do my best to get that data into our database. And here's my email address, which I'll show later. ray.moranz@xerces.org. But simple question, have you seen monarchs utilizing nectar on native plants? If you have, please email me what you've seen them on and approximately how many monarchs you've seen on each native plant species. I would love that information. Okay, now we'll go into some nitty-gritty advanced topics of migration. Of course, they spend the winter, most of them, in Mexico. I want you to know something important about their longevity. The monarchs up here during the breeding season now live only 2 to 6 weeks on average. But the monarchs generation that flies from the Canada and the US down to Mexico can live up to 9 months. And that's pretty fascinating. And this is a photo I took of monarchs drinking water down at the overwintering sites. I've never seen monarchs do this in the US. I've never seen them drinking water. I think they get enough nectar up here. Down there at these sites, there isn't enough nectar to go around. So I think that's why they're hitting the water. Want to go through the migration a little bit. March 7th, 2017, where were the monarchs? Well, you had lots overwintering in California. You had millions overwintering in Mexico, but you also had plenty spending the winter. We don't know how many, dozens, well, probably more than dozens, hundreds, thousands spending winter on the Texas coast. That looks like Austin or San Antonio, perhaps. The Gulf Coast all the way to Florida, and then all the way up to South Carolina. So that is something that I'm paying great attention to, is overwintering by monarchs in places other than Mexico. And there's some really interesting reasons why monarchs are hanging out in the Southeast in winter. And some of them I cannot talk about because I've been sworn to secrecy by a friend who's trying to publish on this in the coming few months. She's a very close friend. I was at her wedding. She'd be very, very upset if I broke her secret. So, but I might be able to hint a little bit about stuff. Interesting things are going on in the Southeast for sure. Okay, by early April, the monarchs that spent the winter in Mexico have flown up into Texas, a few into Oklahoma and even southern Kansas. This one made it all the way to Illinois, which is a little too far. Probably weren't any milkweeds yet. And these are overwintering monarchs laying eggs. They're males looking for females and females laying eggs. I'm sorry, I went the wrong way. A month later, we have their offspring, which is called the first generation. And by early May, they've made it to Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, etc. Once again, I went the wrong way. I'm going to skip these two, speed up. By early June, they've made it just about as far north as they're going to go. And these are still first generation monarchs for the most part. Monarchs born in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Arkansas, southern Kansas, Arkansas, that have flown all the way up to Winnipeg and Ontario. Pretty amazing. By July, we don't have many monarchs down here in the southern US, and most of them are up north breeding. By August, the ones up north are starting to head back down. And of course, they're nectaring. As they come down, they're nectaring because they need to build up fat reserves. What is the single most important state for them to nectar in? Texas. Dr. Lincoln Brower, again, my mentor, back in the 90s, published a study and showed that the monarchs aren't obtaining that much fat. They're not building that much fat in Wisconsin and Iowa and Kansas on their way down. It's in Texas where they really suck up a lot of nectar and build up the fat reserves they need to spend the winter. What else is happening in the Southern Plains in August and September? Look at this graph. Well, maybe I should explain it first. This graph is from a paper by Dr. Tyler Flockhart and others. And what it represents is where monarchs that overwinter in Mexico, where they were born. These researchers went down to Mexico, collected thousands of monarchs, put them in freezers, killed them. Eventually, they analyzed their chemistry, and by analyzing the chemicals inside the monarchs, figured out that a large chunk, more than anywhere else, of those monarchs were born in the Midwest, and a bunch were born in Canada, North Dakota, Montana, and a bunch in Ontario and Western New York, but 11% were born in the Southern Plains. When were they born? They fed as larvae in August and September, and that became adults and flew down to Mexico. So my question for you is, do you have milkweeds? And I want to discuss this with folks. And in the question and answer, let's discuss, do you have native milkweeds in August and September for monarchs to feed on in the normal year? Probably not this year because of the horror of the drought. But in most years, I see more monarch caterpillars in August and September than I do at any other time, because our native milkweeds, they die back in the summer and then they come back up, or they don't die back at all, and they're hosting monarchs. So we get what's called a fifth generation. Okay, now I'm going to get into my next segment, which is how folks with acreage can help monarch butterflies. If you have acreage, if you are an agricultural producer, a farmer or a rancher of some sort, and this could include raising poultry. The folks who raise poultry on acreage might classify as an agricultural producer with regards to the USDA. If you are an agricultural producer, or you have friends or relatives who are agricultural producers, let them know about these programs to help monarchs. The EQIP program and the CSP program, which are the two big programs which help with soil conservation and water conservation, but they can also provide technical and financial assistance to help farmers save monarchs. The main programs, the main practices that they support in our neck of the woods are brush management. In other words, getting rid of junipers. They also help fund prescribed burning and prescribed grazing. Prescribed grazing is practices to help ranchers graze in a manner that is more friendly to butterflies. Well, to all kinds of conservation needs. They also help support planting of habitat via range planting or wildlife habitat planting. In other words, if you have a farm or ranch, you might be able to get money from the USDA to help you buy seeds to plant monarch habitat or pollinator habitat in general. So I want to give an example, and that's our farm. This is part of our farm a few years ago, covered with eastern red cedar trees. And under those eastern red cedar trees, what native plants were growing? Virtually nothing. The shade was so dense, and these cedars are such water hogs, that this was a desert for forbs, for native forbs. And obviously a desert for butterflies, except maybe for the juniper hairstreak, which feeds on juniper as a caterpillar. So I got help from various agencies to cut down 900 cedar trees and demolish them. And it was a lot of work. I didn't do most of it. We contracted most of it out, but I did do some, as is shown by the photo of me on the left. And then I planted some native wildflower seed. This was loaded with annuals. This is Biden's Xerces, and we got great flowering just a few months later. What you see here used to be covered with junipers. A few months later, less than a year later, it's covered with flowers. It's pretty satisfying. NRCS also funds me and my family to do prescribed burning on our land. Yeah, it's close to our house, so I was nervous as heck, but I got a bunch of friends to help. We had a great day. It was a cold day. The fire kept us warm, and we improved monarch habitat. with help from the NRCS. Some of the other work that NRCS has helped on our land is, again, more wildflower planting. This is on our pond dam. This used to be all Bermuda grass. And this is just the beginning. It's going to look a lot better next year. Here's another shot. Monarda citriodora, Gaillardia pulchella, Retibita columnifera, and a monarch nectaring right here. So if you have acreage or have friends or relatives in Wilco who have acreage and might want to help monarchs, consider calling this number, 512-863-6502. This is your USDA service center, and they might be able to provide you with technical and financial assistance to help monarchs and other pollinators. Maybe they won't. Maybe you're not eligible. Maybe your county just doesn't have the cash. I don't know. Maybe that county within USDA doesn't have the cash. But it's worth a try. If you are curious, feel free to call me first or email me first if you have questions about it, and I can fill you in. I'm going to skip that one. Okay, I better hurry. Where can you get more information? Well, I bet a bunch of you native plant folks have already seen this amazing book. Many of you hopefully have it. It's the free download, of course, ID of the Asclepias plants of Texas. It's a gorgeous book. It's fascinating, by Jason Singhurst. I've gotten to meet Jason and Ben. I haven't met Walter yet. But wonderful, wonderful document. If you want to learn more about nectar plants of the Southern Plains, I'm pretty proud of this document. This is something that I helped publish. It's an NRCS publication, and I did provide the link for it in the chat box early on, way up at the top of the chat box. Important plants of the monarch butterfly for basically Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. And it's got a list of about, in total, this is not the entire list, it's got a list of about 80 species that are native to this region, which are great for monarchs. And for each species that it lists, it has 2 pages of details, 2 pages of photos and information on the biology of that species. One of my favorite native milkweeds, Asclepias perennis, needs wet areas. You could grow it in Wilco, you just have to give it supplemental water. Probably, well, it's not native to Wilco, but native to Houston and maybe even Corpus. To find that document, go to the chat box, or it's a free download at NRCS Monarchs. And the Xerces Society's website has a whole bunch of free downloads on all kinds of topics related to monarchs and other pollinators, including this document about roadside milkweeds of Oklahoma and Texas. If you want to find it, I don't think I put the link to this one. Search the web for milkweeds of Oklahoma and Texas. It's a simple front and back sheet, but it's a nice way to introduce people to the native milkweeds of Oklahoma and Texas. Most of the time, I don't talk about this document because most folks aren't geeky enough to get into native thistles. But this is the Native Plant Society of Texas. You guys are the real deal. So 92 pages of information on native thistles of the US, covers Texas thistles as well. Details on how to propagate these. What was that?
Awesome.
It is awesome. It really is awesome. This was written by coworkers of mine, so I can brag on it. And I have used this book. I'm a native thistle farmer now. I am growing, well, I think I'm over 1,000 Cercium altissimum, and I am growing them for seed production to sell to others who want to enhance habitat for monarchs and other pollinators. So great book, free download, just search Xerces Thistle Guide. I'm going to skip this one. This is a great book. I should mention this is not free by any means, but it is available on Amazon and other sites. 100 Plants to Feed the Monarch. It is all about native milkweeds and native nectar sources. I will say the coverage is national. So it has some Texas species, but it has a bunch of species that you would never want to plant in Texas because they wouldn't be able to take the heat. Wonderful book, and we're very proud of it. It just won, just this week, it won a book award from the American Horticultural Society, one of 3 books published in the last year to win this national award. We also have a YouTube channel to learn a lot about pollinators and monarchs. We have a presence on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So takeaway messages. Texas is the most important state for the eastern population of monarch butterflies because of all the milkweeds we have in Texas, because of the importance of getting nectar on their way south to Mexico. The native plants you put out there really make a difference. And finally, USDA programs and practices exist that can help agricultural producers improve monarch habitat. Donors make my work possible and the work of my coworkers possible. So consider becoming a member of the Xerces Society. We're very, very grateful for our membership. I want to acknowledge our members and other supporters. And I'm happy to say that this list of corporate and governmental sponsors is continuing to grow. So we appreciate this, very much appreciate the support we receive to help keep our work going. Here's my email address. If you want to contact me, shoot me an email today, tomorrow, anytime, ray.moranz@xerces.org. But now, is there any time for questions?
How far can a monarch fly in a day?
Let me, let's see, let me take the presentation down. Should I take it? Does it matter? I guess it doesn't matter. How far can a monarch fly in a day?
Yes.
Without the help of wind, I think we're looking at more like 30 miles. With the help of a strong south breeze or a strong north breeze, we're talking about a couple hundred. So there are times for us it'd be early October where the monarchs are stuck in Kansas, and we're wondering where are the monarchs, and then all of a sudden the strong north wind kicks in, and they get blown past us. They get blown from Wichita. They're in Wichita one day, and the next day they're down near the Red River, or maybe in 2 days. But yeah, they can go well over 100 miles on a day with wind. Any other questions?
We've got some Zoom questions and Erin's going to read them out loud so we can hear them in the room.
Okay.
Great.
Let me know if you can't hear me, Ray. One question was, do you ever use iNaturalist observation data for your research?
Yes, I do. I do use iNaturalist, and I need to use it more. That's just something I've started doing in the last year. I also use Journey North data. The trick is most people who show monarch caterpillars, who show monarchs nectaring on plants on iNaturalist, they identify the monarch, but they don't identify the plant.
Yeah.
I'm lucky, I'm pretty good at plant ID, but it's hard for me to identify plants in New Hampshire and Idaho and Arizona. I used to live in Florida, so I can get the Florida ones, and I can get a lot of Oklahoma and Texas plants, but not all of them. But yeah, iNaturalist is a good resource for that. Good point.
What explains the big difference in lifespan, where some were living for 3 weeks and some for 9 months?
Excellent question. I have done no research on that, but I've been told by researchers, by monarch researchers, that the difference in lifespan is mainly due to hormonal changes in the monarch. In August and September, as monarchs sense that it's time to migrate south, their reproductive hormones get shut down. And when they have less reproductive hormone in their system, they don't die of old age. The monarchs in the summertime have reproductive hormones surging through their bodies, and that helps shorten their lifespan. That's what I've been told. And I've heard nothing to contradict that.
Well, and then I want to add on to that one, how do they know how old they are?
What was that? How do they know what?
How do they tell how old they are?
Well, of course, it's hard to tell. It can be hard to tell. Now, the older they get more worn. You know, they lose scales, they fade. As they lose scales off of their wings, their color fades. But another way you tell is when someone tagged them in Toronto in August, and then that monarch flies all the way to Mexico and spends the winter, and then somebody catches it in Wilco in March. Isn't that, but that happens. It's miraculous, but that's really the best way to know how long these guys live.
This question that just came up on chat, I have a similar question.
Okay.
Bob Camper, who is here with us, is a longtime native plant gardener, lives in the Round Rock area. And he made the comment that he photographed monarchs last year, which was a relatively wet year for us in Williamson County, from March to, did you say October, November? March to November, every month. There was a steady monarchs, but it's a desert for monarchs. I mean, well, in more ways than one. We're not seeing any monarchs per se. A few, but.
Same story here in northern Oklahoma. Most summers, the average summer, we have virtually no monarchs in late June and early July. And then some show up in late July and early August, which is way too early to be the ones that migrate to Mexico, all the way to Mexico. Way too early. The ones that are going to make it in Mexico migrate through here around October 3rd. But we get some showing up August 3rd. And what are they doing when they show up August 3rd? They are mating and they are laying eggs. And we've got milkweeds for them. Our Asclepias viridis, most of them go dormant, but some of them don't. And the monarchs lay on that like crazy. And so I'm curious, what milkweeds were they laying on last year? Which species?
Were you photographing them on milkweed species or on nectaring?
Mostly they were nectaring on
Nectaring on agarita, that would be very early. That'd be March. Greg's mist, Salvia farinacea, and I'm going to add golden crownbeard, which we have changed cowpen daisy to golden crownbeard for our plant sales because people say cowpen daisy, ew, no, I don't want that. We changed it to golden crownbeard. We sell it. We give plugs to school children. It's just, oh, I love that. Yes. So marketing tool.
That is a great tip. Yeah, I like golden crownbeard. Does sound a little more fancy.
Yeah.
I would strongly suggest that because they were there all summer, that they wouldn't be able to survive all summer with their reproductive hormones going.
I think Onotheroides is that's what I saw most of them feeding. Okay, the crowd in here is agreeing that Asclepias onotheroides, Zyzotes was the plant of choice, but it's a nice big broad leafy.
Yes.
And two, it'll support a few more than those skinny leaf dudes do.
Yep, that makes sense to me. And I have a coworker in NRCS in Fort Worth, and he has initiated a study of the ecology of Onotheroides, Asperula, and Viridis, trying to figure out why you have one, what their ecological preferences are. It's pretty fascinating, and he's an expert on soil, so he's teaching me so much. But even though his drought is just about as bad as yours, he has one Zyzotes that popped up. Most of them died, but one has come back. And
My Zyzotes are not minding the drought.
Really?
Yeah, they're hanging on okay. They're getting dew from the downspout, I think.
Good.
Some days.
So in a normal year, you would have monarchs on them now. I bet you could in a good year, but with monarchs are just they're not here either. So I think with the drought, they just got the heck out of here.
Are they up north? Are y'all counting?
They're up north. They're up north. They're up north. Especially the Northeast. The Northeast is having a banner year. The North Central is not so good this year, but the Northeast is having a great.
Okay, ready for more?
Another question.
They're coming in. Lana Dion says she's heard many times that we should not have milkweed around in the fall because it would disrupt the diapods and cause them to procreate instead of continuing on to Mexico. Is there
Yes. What months? What months? Specify which months.
in the fall?
In the fall. What's fall for y'all? October.
October, November. Yeah.
I have native milkweeds in September, August, September, October, November, and I have monarchs using them. It's natural. It's natural. Some of my tuberosa, most of my tuberosa go sort of dormant in the fall, but some of them don't. And monarchs lay eggs on them.
Inside the room here, they're saying it's generally the tropical milkweed, the curvassica,
Yep.
is the one that they're recommending that you cut down because
That's
it
right.
will, you get down on the I-10 corridor and it will hang around for you.
Yes. You notice how I didn't mention that? I didn't mention that one. Yeah,
Good.
I don't grow that one anymore.
Good.
I was taught, Dr. Brower, again, my mentor, that was the first milkweed he taught me to grow way back in 1991. And he, eventually he learned not to grow it anymore, and I don't grow it anymore. Fascinating plant, but yeah, there are reasons not to grow that. But if you've got a native milkweed and it's up in September and October, and monarchs are laying eggs on that, there's a chance that those eggs will become butterflies and fly down to Mexico. So,
Well, you just showed us on this secret map that they may just go to Port A like the rest of Austin. They might,
they might go to Port A. And some of them are going to use tropical milkweed in Port A all winter. But some of them are not. That's the secret.
Yeah.
People know, the monarch scientists know that they're using tropical milkweed on the Gulf Coast. But there are also monarchs down there that aren't anywhere near tropical milkweed, and I can't tell you why.
Okay.
I wish I could.
But
You just got to go over there this winter and try to discover the secret for yourself.
You can do a blog post for our chapter and we'll put it on our page and say, Ray reveals all, and link to her paper, and we can all go like her paper or whatever.
Once her paper is published. It's really pretty fascinating, and again, close friends, so I don't want to ruin her surprise.
What else we got?
What does the recent announcement that the monarchs are on the endangered list mean to you, and new plans for action to respond to it?
I didn't hear that one.
It was technical.
Can you repeat it, Beth?
Is it down in the chat?
What does the recent announcement that the monarchs are on the endangered list mean to you, and new plans for action to respond to it?
So, about what that question is referring to is that I think about 2 weeks ago,
Yes.
the IUCN, which I think stands for International Union for the Conservation of Nature, something like that, an international body of people interested in conservation, declared that monarchs were endangered. That has no legal teeth in the United States of America or any other nation whatsoever. So it doesn't dramatically affect policy. It doesn't affect policy in the US at all, except it is validating to us as an organization that is worried about the state of monarchs, the condition of monarchs. It's validating us that an independent body, an international body, has looked at the science, looked at the data and said, hey, we think monarchs are in trouble too. That's why that's the big importance of it. It's more, it's more support in the interpretation of the science that monarchs are in trouble, and hopefully it will make the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service a little more, maybe it'll make them more likely to list monarchs as threatened under the Federal Endangered Species Act quicker. Or maybe it'll stimulate federal agencies to do even more for monarchs than they currently do. But the endangered and threatened status that will really matter is if the federal government ever lists monarchs as endangered or threatened. That'll have teeth.
Then we have a couple of related questions about what can we do to support the migration this year in face of the drought, where there's just not a lot of nectar plants around.
As I hinted out in the chat box earlier, I don't know if people saw it. In drought years, well, let's think of it this way. In the typical year, where are most of the nectar plants that monarchs are using in Texas? They're in rangeland. They're on the ranches because they're in your gardens too, but there's a lot more ranch in Texas than there is garden. And they're on the river's edges, things like that. This, in a big drought year, even the rangeland doesn't have any nectar plants. Your gardens, if you irrigate, could have more monarchs than ever, or more than since the last drought. The best year I ever had for monarchs in my garden was 2012, because I was the only game in town. They were flying over Kansas, and Kansas was a desert, and they flew over northern Oklahoma. This is October, and that was a desert. And then they fly over my little bitty garden, and they see a sea of yellow flowers. And I watched them drop out of the sky onto my golden crownbeard. So if you don't have nectar plants, buy some. It's not too late to sow golden crownbeard. I've sown it in early August and had it blooming by early October. So you could sow golden crownbeard now, water it, and there's a good shot you'll be feeding monarchs. For you guys, it's what, mid-October, late October, early November? So don't give up.
Any more questions in the room? Thank you, Ray. Nobody asked you about insecticides, did they?
Thank goodness. Oh, thank you so much for mentioning that. Because I was going to ask you all to prompt me. I think this is probably obvious to this group, to y'all. But if it's not, just to make sure, be sure to ask your nurseries what they're spraying on your plants. The Xerces Society just completed a study with Cornell University of milkweed plants purchased at nurseries all over the country, many different species, native and tropical. And what they found is most of the milkweed plants we were buying, whether it was California, Oklahoma, we didn't get any from Texas because they didn't authorize me to drive down to get them. I'm the closest one to Texas. Excuse me. What they found was most of these native milkweeds or exotic milkweeds being sold at nurseries had insecticides, and plenty of them had enough insecticides to kill monarch caterpillars. So ask your nursery what they're spraying. Only buy them if they're not spraying bad stuff. It's again, your group probably better at that than anyone, but I just used to assume that nurseries weren't doing that kind of stuff, but the great majority of them, especially the big box places, they're spraying some nasty stuff.
We have a great wholesale organic grower right here in Georgetown that grows Xerces and tuberosa.
Wonderful. You're very lucky.
Yeah.
Very lucky.
And that's all the Native Plant Society. Well, that's all our chapter sells. So they're organic. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, folks, for having me.
Thank you so much, Ray.
My great pleasure. My great pleasure.
All right.
Well, I'm signing off from northern Oklahoma. Good luck. Good luck this fall. Hope you get some rain.
Thanks. Hope to
Bye-bye.
hear from you again.
Oh, that'd be great. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right.
How do I, oh, stop sharing and leave.
Bye. Okay.
Right.
Can they see that? Can they see my virtual screen? No, they can't. I'll have to share, don't I?
Yeah.
Hang on, guys. We got one more thing to go here. Share screen. Share. Current slide. Okay. Good night to our virtual attendees. Thank you so much for joining us. We did record this, so it will be available in a few days, probably on our YouTube channel. I hope you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. So as soon as Erin gives me the word.